As you may have heard, the debate will be broadcast on Prairie Public Radio. Dave Thompson, the news director, is up there. He will introduce his broadcast, and when he cues me, then I'll start, all right? Might be just a minute. Good evening from the North Dakota Heritage Center, and welcome to the 2014 North Dakota Agriculture Commissioner Candidates Debate. I'm Al Gustin. I'll be a moderator for the event. I'm joined by Agriculture Commissioner candidates Doug Goring and Ryan Taylor. First, a quick review of the rules that we'll be following tonight. The debate is scheduled to run 1 hour. A coin toss was held earlier this evening to determine tonight's order. Each candidate will have 3 minutes for opening remarks. The question order will rotate between the candidates. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to respond to the questions as posed by a representative of each sponsoring organization. Candidates may also use their allotted time to rebut their opponent's responses to preceding questions. Each candidate will have 3 minutes for closing remarks. Our timer is seated in the front row and will alert the candidates of their time use. I ask that there be no applause, signs, or comments from the audience, and that we are respectful of each other. Finally, thank you to our host organizations, the North Dakota Farmers Union, the North Dakota Stockmen's Association, North Dakota Association of Rural Electric Cooperatives, the North Dakota Corn Growers, the North Dakota Soybean Growers, the Red River Valley Sugar Beet Growers, and the Northwest Landowners Association. Thank you, too, to Prairie Public Radio for airing this debate this evening. So, to our candidates, gentlemen, welcome to both of you. Thank you for being here, and let's begin. We begin with opening remarks. Mr. Taylor won the coin toss, and will go first.
Thanks, Al. Thanks to the ag organizations that are sponsoring this tonight, and as well as the rural electric cooperatives. We appreciate this opportunity to talk to the people about this race, both here and across the state on the radio. I think it's a justifiable part of our democracy to make sure that people get to ask their questions and to know that as representatives and elected leaders, we're accountable to them. I want to thank my wife, Nikki, who will be putting our kids to bed by herself tonight, and all the sacrifices she's made as we've made this race for Ag Commissioner in North Dakota. Had the honor of sharing 11 years of my life with her as a partner, and we have fond memories of the 10 years in the state Senate here, and the chance that we had to bring biennial babies down to Bismarck. Brought a new baby in the 05, the 07, and the 09 sessions, which we enjoyed having them with, and I think even a few of my fellow legislators enjoyed having them around. My whole life has revolved around agriculture and policy, which I think are the two traits that we would want in an elected official in this position. I'm blessed to make my life as a fourth-generation cattle rancher on a place that was homesteaded by my family in 1903. I've ranched there for 22 years since I graduated from North Dakota State University, studying agriculture and economics and communications. All good fields of study for the job ahead. I won 3 elections and served as a state senator for 10 years, 3 sessions of that on the Senate Ag Committee. Currently serving as a McHenry County Commissioner, and I need to drive home tonight to get back for the county commission meeting tomorrow morning. So we've seen leadership and policy making at a variety of levels. We know that this race is being watched for a lot of reasons. One, because it deals with our #1 industry in North Dakota, agriculture, affects the economies in every county of North Dakota, every main street. And we know it's also being watched because of the seat it holds on the Industrial Commission in North Dakota. So along with the governor and the attorney general, this is a place where we can work on the future of North Dakota, both in oil and gas development, the Bank of North Dakota, the Housing Finance Agency, the State Mill and Elevator, to name just a few. We've rolled out a number of policies in this campaign, which I believe is a campaign of ideas. And whether it's had to do with rail transportation or the landowners' issues in the West, whether it's had to do with even student loans in the intellectual capital of North Dakota, or management of the department itself, we've talked about issues that are important to the race and important to North Dakota. We have a historic opportunity in North Dakota. We have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to chart the future for our children and our grandchildren in a way that they'll be proud of. So we look forward to the debate tonight. We look forward to a race that we think will be about bringing a long and lasting harvest to our state for generations to come.
Thank you. Mr. Goring?
Thank you, Al. Thanks to our hosts, Farmers Union, Stockman's, to the rural electrics cooperatives, and our soybean and corn growers. Appreciate it. Red River Valley sugar beet growers, thank you for also hosting, and to the Northwest landowners. And thank you, Al, for coming out of retirement to do this. We sure appreciate it, and thanks, Ryan, for being here this evening. My son, Dustin, and I farm south of Minokan. We've probably produced almost every crop in the state of North Dakota, and when you think about it, we produce almost 50 different commodities in the state. I'd say a few that we haven't have been dry beans, soybeans, or sugar beets, potatoes, at least commercially we haven't grown them, and buckwheat. But with all of that, it certainly gives you an intimate understanding and relationship of agriculture, but it also helps give and broaden one's perspective on what it takes to be an agriculture commissioner and how you need to look at everybody's different situations and perspective. My son is the next generation that's farming with me on the farm, and even given our current situation in agriculture, he's optimistic about the future. But then, clear across the state of North Dakota, a lot of people are very optimistic about the future of North Dakota. And why not? I mean, in order to keep North Dakota continuing down a path of success, I think it's critical that we keep moving forward. We need to develop real solutions for real problems with real results, much like we did at the Department of Ag when we worked with staff and the Port of Vancouver to develop an agreement to look at alternative methods for moving grain out of the state of North Dakota. When we looked at our mediation program, broadened the scope of that program to address issues, and then looked at developing a pollinator plan that's now being adopted and utilized nationwide. But it's also about supporting initiatives that serve North Dakota best. Diversity in our ag economy, our ag sectors. It's about innovation, which helps us compete in a global market. It's also about research that helps us become more efficient, more effective. It's about trade, because we produce far more than we can consume. We actually export into 73 different countries, and in the last 4 years, we've increased exports by 70% for ag products. And if you think about it, 96% of the global population lives outside of our borders. 80% of all the buying power in the world is outside our borders. And 92% of all the middle class growth will take place outside of our borders. But we have other challenges, and that's federal overreach, waters of the U.S., and the Food Safety Modernization Act. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goring. We'll now have questions from our sponsoring organizations. Each organization representative will step forward to ask a question. We begin with the North Dakota Soybean Growers Association, and since Mr. Taylor began with the opening remarks, Mr. Goring will be the first response to the question.
Good evening. I'm Scott Rising with the North Dakota Soybean Growers Association. I serve as their legislative director. Please share, if you would, your perception of the North Dakota Ag Department's role in communicating the value of agriculture to its citizens. What's working well and what more needs to be done?
We have about 105 programs at the department. We got about 107 employees. 77 of those are full-time employees. We spend a great deal of our time mostly on regulatory work, because it's regulatory in nature is what the department is, but about 10% is spent on promotion and advocacy. But one thing we have brought to the table that's different from a lot of ag departments across the United States, it is education compliance. It's outreach. It's about advocating for, and it's about taking a common sense approach to regulating the industry. And through that, we're able to step up and do some education, but then we take it a step further. Through our other programs, such as a Hunger-Free Garden program and our local foods programs, our Pride of Dakota programs, We step out and engage the public, and we help them understand where their food's coming from, where they can access some of our growers markets, our farmers markets, and our growers association, work with them. We take it to the next level, and they have responded in a very positive manner. We start to see more and more engagement. The other day when I was visiting a school for Pride of Dakota lunch, I started asking those kids if they knew where food where it comes from. I held up bread. They said, oh, that comes from wheat. I held up a banana. They said they had no idea. But we got to talk about some other issues. Milk. It was amazing. Cheese, tomato soup, all those different things, they had a very good, clear understanding where it came from. So we are making progress, and we're doing more in our schools with ag in the classroom, and we're having teachers engaged in that process. That's what we need to do. We need to start at that age, but we also need to engage the public. And sometimes it's kind of interesting that the public doesn't really get that engaged, even when our news media will take on an issue and talk about, and I'll use this one for example, our noxious weed program. We find new weeds, or we have noxious weeds out there that cause a lot of economic harm to our farming and ranching industry and our rural citizens. Sometimes the media will pick it up, sometimes they won't. I put out a press release about a noxious weed that might cause a pet to get sick, and all of a sudden, you should see, my phone rings off the hook, the media is calling, all these interviews because they want to talk about how it personally impacts them. That's an opportunity when you open that door to talk about some of the challenges and the plight that our farmers and ranchers are dealing with when it comes to noxious and invasive weed species. So those are opportunities. You open that door and you step into it, but you talk about something that's personal to them and then take it that next step.
Mr. Taylor?
Thanks for the question, Scott. Obviously, communicating with our customers is probably a prime role for anyone in agriculture if we're going to stay in this business and continue to have markets and continue to have customers. I think we need to do the work both in North Dakota and throughout the country and abroad. And obviously, I've had a fair bit of experience in communicating agriculture to other people. Writing a column for 20 years in Ag Week magazine, I've had a chance to communicate with people, speaking to them firsthand. And as a rancher, I've had a chance to be in stores, actually sampling products with them at places like Lund's and Byerly's in Minneapolis. And you cross that chasm that Doug referred to, where people start to realize that this food comes from somewhere and someone who cares about it. Who cared about producing it, who cared about the land that it came from, and who cares about the role that it plays in their family's diet. These are important things to relate, and as Ag Commissioner, we need to know that we're articulating that extremely well every day in the job, whether it's through the hardworking people in the department that put out the news releases, that do the outreach, that do the Pride of Dakota programs. Granville is in my legislative district that I had the chance to serve, and having Granville as a school that grew some of their own products and brought those into the cafeteria, even in a little town like Granville, there's still a chasm sometimes that you need to cross and make sure that every one of those children understands. In the campaign, we rolled out a couple of initiatives that we haven't seen enacted in the department, and it's hard to know quite why. Within the farmers markets of North Dakota that have grown in size and number across the state, we still weren't applying for USDA grants to use the programs available to WIC, Women, Infants, and Children. Coupons available at farmers markets, so that there's a place where you start to tell the story and they maybe meet some of the producers, at least on even that scale, at a farmer's market. For senior nutrition, for our senior citizens who are of lower income that could benefit from those coupons. Now, not everyone's going to get their products at a farmer's market, but those are one of opportunities that we haven't been taking advantage of. So I think every day going forward, in 4 years of the term as an agriculture commissioner, you talk that story every day to every group that you can get in front of, and not just talking to people that know. Talking to others that maybe don't know, to our urban areas. As North Dakota even, it's hard to imagine that North Dakota is actually becoming an urban state. But we're not so far from the farm. And if we articulate that position to them and tell them about our farmers and ranchers that all of you represent, we can get that story to them.
Our next question will come from the Red River Valley Sugar Beet Growers Association.
Thank you, Al. Nick Sinner with the Red River Valley Sugar Beet Growers Association. I serve as their executive director. And in terms of trade, considering the importance of trade to the well-being of the agricultural community of North Dakota, how will you work to ensure that current trade agreements are administered appropriately and that future trade agreements do no harm to the crops grown in North Dakota?
Mr. Taylor?
Thank you, Nick, and knowing that this is an important issue for the Red River Valley sugar beet growers, in particular the trade agreement on North American free trade that allowed Mexico to bring sugar into the U.S., and the fact that your organization and your growers have been involved in an anti-dumping case for some time. Trying to remember the latest progress on that, but it sounds like there may be some relief in sight and maybe some duties available. I think as you look at that role within the State Ag Commission, again, it's a role of using the bully pulpit to represent what North Dakota agriculture is. And North Dakota agriculture includes a lot of sugar beet growers that add to the economy of the Red River Valley in a very big way. Sugar beet growers that I know have struggled with rail transportation and processing to have the coal in their plants and get the product out. But when that product is available and ready to be shipped, we need to talk to those in Washington who would enact trade agreements and make sure they know the position of North Dakota's sugar beet growers. If I can be the voice for your growers, I'll do that. If given the information that you're going to be on top of even more than I am, we're definitely going to be able to tell that story, and we want to have you alongside of us because we will represent all of North Dakota agriculture. Whether we grow it on our farm or not, I haven't had much success growing sugar beets in Towner, but we can do it on both ends of the state, whether it's feeding the old Holly sugar plant, now American Crystal in Sydney, or all the plants up and down the Red River Valley. We know that we have to tread carefully sometimes and be thoughtful in our response to make sure that actions aren't taken against us that we maybe didn't foresee. But we want to do what's good for North Dakota's farmers. And if it's standing up to Mexico, we do just that. We do it through the organizations and the process that's allowed. And maybe if it even helps, me hablo español un muy poquito, if that would help, that I would speak just a little bit of Spanish to enforce our position in those negotiations.
Thank you. One thing about the trade agreements that we have in place and we have to be concerned about is free versus fair. And those have been issues for a long time. And through NAFTA, and I'll use some of these examples, Nick, because it's your organization that's deeply affected by some of this. And that's under NAFTA. There were agreements set in place and quotas were met over a period of time, and then those borders were allowed to be opened and product moved into the United States. This issue did come up, and I met with Undersecretary Skuse, who is the Undersecretary for Foreign Ag Service, and we talked about that very same issue. Sugar pouring into this country from Mexico was certainly legal. The problem was the sugar was also coming from other countries that were diverting it through Mexico. That was the biggest problem. We started working with the U.S. Trade Representative on this issue, and Undersecretary Skuse started getting into some of those countries where this was coming from. He sat down and met with the leaders in Mexico. We talked about the effects here in the United States. And because of how things transpired, it actually collapsed our sugar market. These are the types of things we need to avoid, especially with a sensitive market like that. It takes very little to actually disrupt it and throw things out of whack. We may have an agreement under NAFTA, and that's just one agreement that we have to be concerned about. But it's about making sure that they are not diverting product from other countries through those markets and into our market, because that is illegal. It almost got resolved, and then we found out that there was an overstatement, or I should say an understatement of product that was in this country being produced, primarily sugar, from sugar beets and sugar cane. We do need to watch this very closely, and we also need to work with other countries to find out exactly where they're at when they start to put up barriers like non-tariff trade barriers on all of our products. These are things we need to stay on top of, because every time we step into a market and step into a country, we need to present it as a win-win situation. We're not there to displace your food. We're there to incorporate our food into your food system. And when we look at trade, we need to look at it as fair trade. And we need to make sure that that's set up in a manner that we aren't being disruptive and we're not tearing things down and causing more disruption in the marketplace. Sugar was one of those that we had some very bad things happen just in the last 18 to 24 months. And I'm hopeful that this gets resolved. Unfortunately, it's probably going to take another 1.5 to 2 years before we fully get the system fixed. But then right now in the agricultural markets, it's probably going to take that long to get the corn market, the bean market, the wheat market, and the sugar market fixed.
We'll now hear from the North Dakota Corn Growers Association.
Thank you, Al. Clark Price with the North Dakota Corn Growers. Mr. Gehring, Mr. Taylor. North Dakota farmers and ranchers need a strong, consistent leadership in dealing with EPA and their proposed rules, such as WOTUS. Can you tell us ways you would be that voice and how you would develop a plan to combat those rules that could bring hardship to our industry?
Mr. Goring.
Thank you, Clark. We've continued to do this from day one at the Department of Agriculture. First of all, we've stepped up to show EPA that they don't have to play the gotcha game. The gotcha game has been you go out, you regulate somebody, you show up on the farm, show up in their business, and you get them. And you hit them hard with fines, and you hurt them hard. And it has no real effect. It actually just does more discouragement, and it causes more problems. One of the areas that we've stepped up in has been in education compliance. And through that, we have over an 80% compliance rate in North Dakota. Now, that may not sound significant to you. Do you know that EPA only runs about a high 40 to low 50s, and most of my colleagues in other states run in the 50s and 60s? We've shown that you can go out there and work with those people because, quite frankly, most people want to do what's right. Just show them how to do it. Show them what it is that they need to comply with. That's one area. Another area was about 2 years ago, we heard of EPA trying to circumvent agriculture by looking at developing a pollinator plan, their own type of model and regulatory system that would hamper and dampen our ability to produce food and fiber and feed in this country. We got out in front of that. We started working with the beekeepers. We worked with the ag community, the commercial applicators, farmers, ranchers. We worked with the public. We had 2 meetings. The last one was a huge summit in which we had about 11 or 13 states that came to North Dakota that had got involved in this. We circumvented that. We developed a best management model which enhances communication, outlines some criteria in which they need to operate, and now it's being adopted nationwide by a lot of my colleagues in other states, and EPA has supported it. And we did that by not having to have other regulations in place that would harm agriculture and our ability to produce. Waters of the U.S., what a terrible document. That is regulations that would completely take almost every drop of water in every state across the United States. When they start talking about significant nexus, connectivity, and subsurface water, they're talking about every drop of water that would have some ability to connect to navigable waters. That's an issue. Those are things that we need to get out in front of, and we have been. As the Ag Commissioner, and like all my counterparts across the United States, we're the first line of defense. We're generally the ones that know beforehand when something's going to come up. We have squelched a lot of things, we've stopped things, we've changed things. But when they finally come, we're prepared. And we take these things on and we've beaten them back and we've won. But we do have those challenges when there's a directive from the administration and then we're caught up.
Mr. Taylor?
Thank you, and thank you, Clark, for the question. Knowing that Clark comes from both the corn side and the cattle side, we know that there's a couple things to think about in your question. One, we were early in this campaign as the rule was being presented that I stood against the extension of that authority in the Waters of the U.S. rule as well. I believe that as Ag Commissioner, you need to be ready and willing to respond quickly, and sometimes that means having staff in a policy division that are combing the Federal Register on a regular basis. So as these rules come out from Washington, that we're ready to respond. And we use all the minds that we can have available, maybe even within an internship program within the department. Fellow students that I once had a chance to serve with that studied agricultural law, even at NDSU, or certainly work on public policy, because we want to be ready to respond quickly and make sure that those comments are there and they're accurate and that they reflect your feelings as a producer in North Dakota as to what this would do to your business and your ability to raise cattle and corn and to make a profit. Now, I do believe that the best way to keep federal overreach out of North Dakota is to make sure you're doing your level best at the state level. Ag Commissioner has one of the seats, the only seat not appointed by the governor, on the Water Commission. So we look at ways that we accomplish the goal that everyone wants, whether it's in North Dakota or across this country or really around the world. We all want clean water, right? We want to have water that we can mix baby formula with. We want water that's going to be good for our cattle when they drink it. And so let's make sure at the state level that that water is of that quality, that no administration that we would have to stand up against would look at us and say we're not doing our job. We know the rule is fraught with difficulties in terms of obviously going well beyond its original language of navigable waters and all the contributions that would come from a prairie pothole region, which we know would be extremely problematic. I believe in incentives to make sure that we keep our water of the utmost quality. And I'm sure you and others in the room have used the EQIP program just to make sure that as we're placing feedlots across North Dakota, and I think we need a lot more feedlots and a lot more cattle fed in North Dakota eating that North Dakota corn, we're doing it in a manner that assures our clean water for the communities in the neighborhood. And sometimes that's a federal program, like EQIP, that'll help us get the dollars to those farms and ranches to do just that. So I think we need to do more than just say no. We need to say yes to what our responsibilities are to make sure that we get out in front and make sure that the water is so clean that they would never have to come after us. And then we tell the story to make sure they know that when they come to North Dakota.
Our next question comes from the North Dakota Farmers Union.
Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Mark Watney. I'm president of North Dakota Farmers Union. As a captive shipping state, North Dakota relies heavily on rail to transport goods to the market. Do you see any other avenues for moving grain out of the state, or have any ideas how we can reduce rail transportation costs for North Dakota producers?
Mr. Shaler.
Thank you, Mark. Rail has probably been the #1 issue that I've heard when I'm out on the campaign trail across North Dakota, and we've traveled that trail very hard from Bowman to Grand Forks and Williston down to Wahpeton. When we look at the rail situation in North Dakota, I think a couple things come to mind. One, knowing that we're moving a lot more crops than we have in the past in terms of the crop mix we got in North Dakota. But we're putting a lot more other goods on that rail as well. 600 to 700,000 barrels of oil every day obviously takes up a lot of capacity. And we have a booming economy, which we enjoy, that brings in a lot of other consumer goods as well. We know that farming and ranching brought us to the dance. For 125 years, this has been our bread and butter, and this probably isn't our first issue with railroads ever since the state was made a state. If we look at now reducing cost, I think is going to get to a federal realm where we look at the Surface Transportation Board and using the bully pulpit of Ag Commissioner to make sure that they're using all the authority that they have. I look at what an Ag Commissioner can do from the office in North Dakota. One, we know that we have to share the rail right now with energy. And if we look at the numbers just given to us by the Pipeline Authority, which I voted to help create in 2007, and they have good data, we know that even today, when we put 700,000 barrels of oil on the rail, and that didn't just happen overnight. It came from 600, from 500, from 400, from 300,000 barrels. It didn't just happen overnight. That if we put 700,000 barrels of oil on the rail with the pipelines and the refining capacity that we have in North Dakota, we're actually leaving unused space in our pipelines. I'm for building more pipelines. I'm for making sure that the sandpiper gets put in and making sure that we have additional routes to Cushing, Oklahoma and Patoka, Illinois. But I would want to bring people together and make sure that our energy partners know that we would like them to use every inch of that pipeline capacity, because my farmers can't put that grain in the pipe. And we don't want to have them sitting alongside the rail with that grain spoiling. I think we have to look at ways to make sure that we can use more of those products locally. We'll ship 82% of it out by rail now, but maybe we can take that down to 70. We can feed more of those cattle that we talked about. We can have more dairies in North Dakota, and I'm committed to that as a development in North Dakota, both for our rural economies and for our farmers. Maybe some of that grain can go down the road to a feedlot instead of going to a shipping point to try and get on rail that may get put on in the cars and then have to wait a week even after that, even after being months behind. Whether we add value to some of those products and use the tools we've got with the Bank of North Dakota, with the Ag Products Utilization Commission, those will all be a help. But we know this is an issue that we're going to have for 5 years, and I think we need to make sure that we're using every inch of pipeline capacity that we got, make sure that we have more room on the track for farmers, and make sure that we're doing everything we can to grow our own market right here close to home.
Well, I'm glad to hear that Mr. Taylor is supportive of pipelines. I wish that the President was, because he seems to stop them or delay them, and they do have a drastic effect on my farm and a lot of farms across the state of North Dakota, but also all the surrounding states around us. This has been an issue. Affects my farm deeply. I tried selling soybeans this spring, and I had the elevator manager, tongue-in-cheek, say to me, "Commissioner, if you want to move your soybeans, you get me cars." Well, since last October, we have been on the phone. We have been talking to BNSF. We have been trying to make some movement, trying to get a better understanding of what's been going on. And grant you, at first, we just knew of a few problems. And as things transpired, it certainly got worse. By the time we got into March, it got down to the point where we needed some answers and we needed some solutions for the problem. And grant you, in the state of North Dakota, there are no regulatory entities that have control over BNSF or CP. But we did get some commitments from BNSF, and it was to put 500 more locomotives into the system this year, 5,000 more grain cars, but you need warm bodies to go with them. Because by the time we get to this winter, we need more locomotives, because when they break those trains down from 7,200 feet to 4,500 feet, we still have more cars that still need to leave the state. Same amount of product, so we need those people. We made some progress, and we got those commitments. CP wasn't as good right up off the bat, but here recently in the last week, they've come forward and said they're going to do a lot more investing in infrastructure, and that's good because we need it. They have about 34% of all of our track and market in North Dakota. We need them. But I stepped out over a year and a half ago and worked with the Port of Vancouver to develop an agreement so that we can have a backhauling grain program. It's not going to solve our problems, but it's going to provide relief. But here's the other thing. Folks, we need pipelines. There's tensions growing in the state of North Dakota with our central and eastern farmers because they're getting frustrated with our western farmers and ranchers because pipelines aren't going in. And I said, wait a minute. You have to understand there's some real legitimate concerns, and those are the things that we need to step up and address, and we have been doing that, and we're going to do more. But there's some things we have to work through, and there's some issues because north to south and right in the central part of those 17 oil-producing counties, there's different scenarios and different issues. We need to develop more pipelines, and what we have on the books right now that we're projecting is 1.1 million barrels. It needs to be built so that we can move product out of this state in a pipeline, not on rail. And we're going to continue down that path, and we're going to continue to address some of these issues and work through some of these scenarios.
Our next question comes from the North Dakota Stockmen's Association.
Good evening, gentlemen, and thank you for being here. I'm Julie Ellingson. I'm the Executive Vice President of the North Dakota Stockmen's Association. North Dakota agriculture groups are united in their opposition against the Clean Water, Wildlife, and Parks Initiative, better known as Measure 5. Have you formulated a position on this measure? And if so, can you explain the rationale behind your position?
Mr. Goring?
I can. Thank you. Well, I have a lot of deep concerns with Measure 5. First of all, they're looking at a constitutional measure that would take about $150 million a year over 25 years, which would be billions of dollars, in which could be used for property tax relief, schools, and roads. First of all, that really bothers me. Secondly, we have the Heritage Fund. Why don't we use the Heritage Fund, scale it up to meet the needs or those requests? And that's easily enough done. The legislature sees the needs. This was a test and trial period. The Heritage Fund looks like it's working. I've had a lot of good projects come through there. I've seen them, and I think they're going to do a lot of good. Put more money into the Heritage Fund. We don't need Measure 5. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie, and appreciate the question. Measure 5 is probably going to be one of the most contentious and hard-fought battles, I think, on the list of 8 measures that we've got on the ballot. Obviously, you know, I think I'm a 20-year member of the North Dakota Stockmen's Association and voted with you on the resolutions a couple Saturdays ago. Same with the North Dakota Association of Counties, where I was on the resolution committee, as well as North Dakota Farmers Union, and you're all advocating a no vote. And I just filled out my absentee ballot just a day ago, and I'll take it to my county commission meeting tomorrow and hand it to the auditor. And if folks need to look over my shoulder, I'd blacken the oval that said no. So maybe it was that yard sign that Shane Anderson had up the road. I'm not quite sure. But in this, and for me, it had to do with the fact that this would be put in the Constitution. But I want to back up and say that I'm not here to kick the conservation folks in the shins on this issue. And I think when you run for a statewide office in North Dakota, we need to look at leadership that'll take care of the issues after the dust has settled. I think this is going to be a close ballot measure. Whether it passes or fails, I wouldn't make a guess to it right now. But I want to make sure that those who on both sides know that they'll have an ag commissioner when the dust settles on this election as well. That'll bring those two groups together. Both agriculture and conservation got mutual goals, I believe. We have a lot of people in North Dakota that demand and use and appreciate what we provide as farmers and ranchers. Open spaces, clean water, a place to hunt, a place to fish. We know that North Dakota is mostly private lands. And I think that I'm the person that could actually bring those groups together. Because whether it passes or fails, we need to do that. I don't know that we'll see that same kind of leadership if we look at the history of my opponent working at Nodak Mutual. You know, having an important insurance company that had to be taken over by the Insurance Commission with reports of managerial crisis or a civil war. If we look at a department that by the numbers shows 70% turnover, I don't know that this is a record of bringing people together. That's why I want to do that with the agriculture and conservation groups. Pass or fail. If it passes, they'll know that I'm the leader that certainly on that industrial commission is not going to vote for any farmland to be purchased with those dollars. We'll have to find ways that they can work together so that there will be access without purchase. And if it fails, we know that the measure was on the ballot because North Dakota was not doing enough for conservation. And we know we need to do more in the future. There's been talk of that, and you can read in the newspaper certainly about increases to the Heritage Fund. But let's make sure that those people are taken care of as well as our farmers and ranchers.
Now hear from the Northwest Landowners Association.
Good evening, Mr. Goring, Mr. Taylor. Troy Coons, Chairperson, Northwest Landowners Association. Keeping in mind that the Bakken is still in its infancy with only approximately 12% developed so far and typical Bakken wells with multiple locations at each site is predicted to produce for 46 years. The current status means that the reclamation may not take place for over 50 years on much of the land. For example, in Montreal County alone, since the shale boom came into play, there has been 54,000 acres taken out of agricultural production, not including affected adjoining properties. Would you support legislation and/or administrative rule that would mandate baseline soil tests to be taken so that site-specific reclamation on current and future abandoned oil sites can be accomplished in a proper manner, thus allowing succeeding generations the ability to farm and ranch the land as generations has in the past been privileged to?
Mr. Taylor?
Thank you. Thanks, Troy. I appreciate the Northwest landowners and would have enjoyed answering that question at a debate at the State Fair this summer, of course. early in this campaign, I brought out a landowner's Bill of Rights. And within those 5 planks were issues that I know were important to your organization, but more importantly, they're important to all of North Dakota and how we define ourselves as North Dakotans. The heritage of Art Link that reclaimed the land that we've taken coal out from underneath, so that when the landscape is quiet again, let those who follow and repopulate the land be able to say our grandparents did their job well, right? And that's what we want for North Dakota, and that's what I advocate for in my Landowner Bill of Rights. Specific to reclamation, I looked at a bipartisan bill, actually sponsored by a Republican House member, Damshin, 1349, I believe it was, that said, let's look at reclamation in terms of what we demand as a state for our state school lands, in terms of removal of topsoil, stockpiling of the topsoil, putting the contour back in place, and our energy partners do that on state school lands. And I asked within my Landowner Bill of Rights that we go back to that legislation. If there's any modifications we need, we look at that as the baseline, because if it's good enough for our state school lands, it should be good enough for all our farmers and ranchers that don't have the bargaining power of the state of North Dakota. So we know that if we do that, in 40 or 50 years' time, when we've gotten every drop of oil out from beneath the ground, and I'm committed to that we are going to harvest this energy in North Dakota. But all the while that we're pulling the energy out from underneath the ground, on top of the ground, we still got farmers and ranchers that need to make a living. Need to make a living during the boom, and they need to make a living after the boom, because agriculture will be here for another 125 years after we've harvested that energy. So I think we look to Art Link, and we look to the leadership he provided. It may mean having a ag commissioner that will go down to the legislature and advocate on your behalf. As one of the 3 members of the Industrial Commission, I also wouldn't tolerate having one of the employees of the Industrial Commission go in there to testify in opposition to you. I appreciate the work of Lynn Helms, and I know that Lynn knows an awful lot about the geology of this resource, but it is disturbing to me when he would testify in opposition to the Farmers Union and the Northwest landowners and a lot of the farmers and ranchers that I've talked to and would represent as Ag Commissioner. Maybe he could go in neutral, or maybe he could even sign in favor. I know committee chairs do it in different ways, but as Ag Commissioner, I would be there to support.
First thing I want to do is go back to an earlier comment made by my opponent, Mr. Taylor. I think it's a bit disingenuous for a couple of reasons when you go back to talk about the turnover rate in the ag department. When you look at it over an average, it's 10%. But if you accumulate enough years, yeah, you can get 70%. I started to look at other departments in the state. There's departments that have higher turnover than we do when we start breaking it down and looking at it. So I think that's a bit disingenuous, because the other thing that was being done is you were counting people that were retired or died, and I don't think that's very fair, and I don't think it's very nice. I think some respect is due to those people and their families. As for the Bill of Rights, which was a lot of legislation that actually failed the legislature. In fact, many of your members from your party didn't even support it. There's some problems with it. First of all, flow meters and pressure gauges to detect or stop leaks. We just had 3 major ones this year that all had flow meters and pressure gauges on them. They don't work, folks. We tried saying that, and I said it at many times. I've been working with different entities in the United States, and we found some technology. Actually, out of South America, and I'm working with a company in Texas. It's acoustic wave technology, where they put sensors within that pipeline to detect it. We're establishing and trying to find some pipelines right now in North Dakota where we're going to be testing and evaluating this, and there's some work going on with EERC concerning this. The other thing is ground penetrating radar. I've been working with and visiting with the UASs, the unmanned aerial systems, and I talked to somebody that has been doing some of this, and there's an opportunity to adopt and utilize this technology on our pipelines, but we also have to figure some things out concerning UASs, and it's part of what we're doing in the state of North Dakota, and I know that the Lieutenant Governor who chairs that committee, is helping to establish the model in which we are going to be able to fly those UASs. And I think that's monumental. As for the soil test, going back to the whole question, Troy, I think everybody should be doing it now. If you're in oil country, test your soil. Get the numbers. I think that's just good standard practice, because if you do have an issue, you like to get it back to where it is. This is all about remediation, and it's all about, the majority of it is about reclamation. Let's make sure we do it right. My stand has always been mitigate risk, minimize impact, and shrink that footprint out on the prairie, because a lot of those landowners do not have the royalties. That's what you need to be concerned about. But there is a fundamental and constitutional right that exists here, and I will support that. But we need to do some things.
Question now from the North Dakota Association of Rural Electric Cooperatives.
Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Lori Sapu. I'm the Rural Development Director for the North Dakota Association of Rural Electric Cooperatives. My question is, what role, if any, should the Agriculture Commissioner play in promoting rural economic development, such as pushing for better rural infrastructure, including roads, health care, housing, and job creation?
Mr. Goring.
Thank you, Lori. Good question, and it's something we do every day. It's about partnering up. It's about working with others to identify, first of all, what those needs are that exist out there, whether it's broad-based types of technology so that we can have internet in every community, whether we're talking about electricity and making sure that we have the infrastructure out there to support it, great telephone service, all those things that our rural cooperatives have been providing to all of those that have not had those opportunities for decades like they have in other urban areas in North Dakota. We need to continue to step up and support those efforts, and we have a lot of opportunities to do that. In our program, working with the Pride of Dakota people and those companies, we're trying to reach out, support those efforts, ask them what are some of those needs in those communities. You look at quality of life, for example, and I'll back up here just a second. I talked about earlier that we're the envy of the nation. Part of it is because we have low unemployment. We had communities that were drying up not so long ago. I remember 4 or 5 years ago, we'd have a little general store where they were talking about retiring, and there was no one to take it over. Now we have a lot of those communities flourishing. Clear across the state, we don't just have low unemployment in western North Dakota, we got low unemployment across the entire state. We see communities being revived, and through that, we're seeing dollars go back into those communities. We even see through the Industrial Commission, we're using the Housing Finance Agency to do that, Public Finance Authority to help with water projects, sewer projects, water quality issues, and projects that support a higher quality of life. We're seeing medical services rebounding in some of those communities. We are seeing people have an opportunity to have more services in a community than they did before. I have friends that are coming back to this state that have been gone for over 30 years. These are great opportunities. We need to embrace that, we need to help that, and we need to continue to identify what needs exist in those communities, support those efforts. The one thing that I will never, ever support is government picking winners and losers, but we need to create incentives to help out those communities, to help out all those entities that wish to step forward and do more.
Thank you, Lori. I appreciate the question, and having worked in the same area you do at one point in history of my life, know how important it is for our rural economies to have some assistance from time to time. Proud of the work that rural development has done in North Dakota, and Jasper Schneider, who recently is moving on to another position, will be missed. If we look at the Ag Commission post and the tools that we have or would have available to our disposal, we know that North Dakota has a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity here, that we certainly have low unemployment. But when people come back to North Dakota, into these rural communities, central, eastern, or western North Dakota, they need to have a place to live. We know that housing is acutely short in North Dakota. And in the debate that you'll see on Prairie Public here on the 24th, my opponent, of course, used the words naive or deceptive about the fact that I said our housing incentive fund ran out in 6 months in this biennium. Google it, check every source you got, it did. I was there when it was devised in the 2011 session. He said it's a program that's only 2 years old. I know it's 4 years old because I was there to vote for it. The Housing Incentive Fund does good work in North Dakota to make sure that we're putting more housing on the ground. It's an incentive, as we've talked about. But we can't go into a biennium and have the $35 million in tax credits run out in 6 months, November 8th of 2013. So let's look at making sure that we put a number in there that will get us through a whole biennium so that Jolene Klein doesn't have to turn away projects, that doesn't have to turn away $14 million in projects. So that's one piece. You get a house, we also need workforce for our rural economies. That's why I came out with the plan on the student loans, because some folks would say, well, why does an ag commissioner talk about student loans? Having voted in support of the PACE programs in North Dakota that give our businesses a 1% interest rate, I'm glad to do that. We've got the businesses now and we've got the jobs. What they need is workforce. I say give our students the same 1% flat across the board interest rate, not the 5.29 that's on the fixed rate right now. Set North Dakota apart. We know those students that will go to our North Dakota universities have a high likelihood of staying in North Dakota. If we attract families back who can consolidate on that 1% loan, they will add to our workforce. And that's an investment in the intellectual infrastructure of North Dakota. At the same time, all the hard infrastructure that we need in North Dakota, I've long advocated for getting those dollars out to our communities. I see the need for it every day as a county commissioner. There's a lot of places, if we get back to agriculture here, that can grow corn and soybeans in this world. But not every one of them has a road system that'll get it to market.
Thank you. I was told that I may offer a question or two, and so I'd like to do that. North Dakota now has fewer than 100 commercial dairy farms, no cheese plants, very few hog operations, record low sheep numbers. To what extent is this a concern, and what can Agriculture Department do to address it? And if I'm going to add one more thing, because this came from one of my Facebook friends, and it's a good point. What's your opinion of the corporate farming law in North Dakota as it relates to all of this, and the extent to which we have commercial livestock operations in North Dakota? And since Mr. Taylor finished, he will start with this.
Thank you, Al. He said that he might fill in some time, and so we got a question instead of an Ole and Lena joke, which we talked about backstage. There's so much more potential in North Dakota for the livestock industry, and it's something I've obviously dedicated my life to. Knowing that we have all the feedstuffs grown by many of these organizations. And not only the feedstuffs that they grow, but also the byproducts that they produce when we make ethanol or make pasta or any number of other value-added products in the state. I come from a town that had a cheese plant that provided some good jobs in our community, good work and benefits as well. And we miss that cheese plant because there aren't the dairies in our area right now that can support it. I went to a meeting in Carrington on livestock development, and I believe that we have opportunities. There's an area there on the 281 corridor where rural economic development specialists will look at that as a way to grow their area and make sure that we're using some of those feedstuffs right there. I won't get a chance to go to the lamb and wool growers next week, but I'll talk to them about the importance of research and being near and dear to NDSU and the work that they do. There's a couple things we can do. One, we need to be the smartest folks out there on livestock development with our animal scientists to know that this is how we do it in North Dakota. Second, we have the tools within the Bank of North Dakota to provide capital for what's getting to be an even more and more capital-intensive business. If you're going to put feeder cattle in at $2,000 a pop, it's going to take some money, and we use the programs we have. If they're not working, we retool them and make sure they work for our farmers and ranchers. On the corporate farming issue, we know that we can do this under the laws that we have. I believe with the right amount of capital, the right amount of intellectual infrastructure from our universities, that we can get this job done. We have successful stories of people feeding cattle and operating dairies in the state. On the livestock side, I think if the plant in Aberdeen finally picks up its steam, that'll be a huge development for North Dakota, because we'll have a market that's going to take a little less diesel to get those cattle harvested and to a customer. So I have a history in the legislature of not supporting changing our corporate farming laws in the state, but looking at the capital needs, how we can satisfy those, look at the research needs, create a culture where, again, as Ag Commissioner, we talk about this story, and we encourage our young producers to be a part of animal agriculture in North Dakota.
Mr. Goring.
Thank you, Al. About a year and a half, 2 years ago, we went through and started revamping our livestock division. Actually, when I came into office, one of the things I did right away was talk about how we're going to assess and evaluate people and programs, how we're going to change them, modify them, maybe cross-train some people. And one of the areas that we saw a need was livestock development in North Dakota. And as we started progressing, moving forward, we hired one person for that. And they kind of found a different program and that didn't encompass dairy, non-traditional, didn't encompass just beef, and they really wanted to work in a beef area. So they went to South Dakota. So then I decided to take the program and take it a step further. We now have 2 people working in our livestock division where they go out and look at livestock development in the state of North Dakota. Now there's a couple projects I can't talk about right now, but concerning our dairy program, we have lost a lot of dairy farmers. And there you look at the chicken and egg concept, and much what Mr. Taylor has talked about. If you lose a processor, you hurt the producers in the area. Then the producers go by the wayside. Or if you start to lose too many producers, all of a sudden you hurt the processing plant and that goes by the wayside. So we have some real concerns. We're seeing a lot of consolidation where they're starting to consolidate all that milk in areas and in those runs and then move them on out. We haven't lost the cows, but we've lost the farmers. We've seen people retiring and we don't see people stepping in. We do have a couple big projects, a couple of producers that have stepped forward from a couple other states through all of our efforts, and are talking about possibly doing business in North Dakota. One of them looks really favorable, and it'd be about 50% more cows. And that would be great, because that's an opportunity to feed all those feed stocks and feedstuffs. So there are some opportunities we have to work towards that. Concerning the issue of corporate farming, I have concerns about opening up corporate farming all the way, simply because you do that, you now allow nonprofits to come into our state and buy our land, and they can access money and resources from different areas and start competing with farmers. We seem to have every activist and environmentalist out there targeting North Dakota, either because of the prairie pothole region, because of the western landscape, whatever it may be. I have concerns about opening that all the way up. I would like to probably see something that opens it up in just a fashion so that we get some capital in there, where we loosen up and allow them an opportunity, our young producers, to access some of that capital. But it doesn't leverage the land, and it doesn't leverage a large percentage of that operation, just a small portion of it. We can't have that opened all the way up, but we need to find ways to help out our young producers and other farmers and ranchers.
One of the biggest challenges that farmers and ranchers face, especially livestock producers, is finding and keeping qualified labor. Is there a role for the Agriculture Department in addressing that challenge?
I would say in that respect, I have to deal with the same thing. Right now, we're short help on the farm. And we get people that come and apply for a job, and these are people that can't pass a drug test. And then I'm supposed to put them on the farm. If they can't pass a urine test, I'm not going to put them on a big piece of equipment. It's an issue and it's a concern. We've been more resourceful about working with some of our neighbors, doing more things to help alleviate some of those pressures. And it's about inviting some more in. But it's also about, for some of our other farmers in North Dakota, accessing the H-2A program where they can bring in some very qualified, skilled labor from other areas. First, they try across the nation and surrounding states, but then they go a bit further than that into other countries. Those are ways that can certainly help. As for the Ag Department, we don't play a role anymore since labor has been taken out of the Ag Department some 20, 30 years ago or more. But we do step up to help provide some services and help, like with our custom combine program, trying to match up harvesters with those that need it. That has helped alleviate some pressure, but in a year like this, when all of a sudden harvest busts loose all across the state, we don't seem to do a very good job of getting all those combines to those multitudes of farmers. But we're making some headway now. We've had parts of the state stop and dry up. We've had other parts that have been put on hold. But now we got row crops coming off at the same time. We still have small grains coming off in the northern part of the state. There are things that we're just going to continue to need to look at. Where can we find services? Where can we find custom help in that respect to come in and help? Whether it's moving hay, whether it's baling hay, whether it's moving grain, whether it's harvesting grain, there's ways to do that. And what I really appreciate is how resourceful most of our farmers and ranchers are in this state in working with each other and really pulling together to get the job done.
Mr. Taylor?
Labor is a primary issue, and maybe if we reach back again, we know it's been an issue in the department. And knowing that some people have retired from that department, but knowing that those aren't the ones that use terms like a culture of mistrust or a hostile work environment. We know if that's what happens, it's going to be hard to find labor. We got a lot of farms and employers in North Dakota that are going to have a very trusting environment, that are going to have a work environment that I think is very positive, that people will be glad to come to work and take those jobs. But again, we go back to a couple things. They need to have a house. If you look at western North Dakota where my brother-in-law farms near Keene, they had to bring in their own housing, obviously, because they weren't going to find any. And they also had to go as far as South Africa to find those two people that helped bring in the harvest there near Keene. I think North Dakota has an opportunity to help both with housing and with the supply itself, as I mentioned on the student loan side. Obviously, we're going to get some of our workers from points beyond. But I know we can grow a lot of them right here or bring them back to North Dakota. And we're at a time in some sectors of agriculture. In livestock, we know that we've had the market drop out on our commodities that we need to build back out of. Thank goodness we've got a farm bill that will be there as a safety net, that we've got good crop insurance provisions, and that we got that passed in Washington, D.C. But beyond that, we know that we can bring back some of our own who will work in livestock agriculture when we've got the dollars available to work with right there. But let's make it attractive in North Dakota for them. Let's make sure that they have a place to live. If they're getting a 2-year or a 4-year degree, let's make it more affordable for them. Not only through the loans that they might take out, we're not giving that money away, they pay that back. But we also can advocate on the cost of education itself. Not running for the Board of Higher Education, running for Ag Commissioner, but we can certainly advocate on behalf of our students, whether they're your sons or your daughters or your grandsons or your granddaughters. We need them. Maybe they'll become welders or electricians at a 2-year school, or maybe they'll be the engineer that cracks the code for the next boom, the next technology that'll help us get more of our energy. Maybe they'll be the agronomists and the animal scientists that make this industry even more successful to feed a growing population and put food on more people's plates.
Gentlemen, thank you for being part of this debate. We've come to our closing statements, and we'll begin with Mr. Goring.
Thank you, Al. Thank you again for doing this tonight. I want to thank all of our hosts. You've been very good and gracious for setting this up, for promoting it, helping out, for Prairie Public Radio for also airing this. North Dakota has made real progress. We are the envy of the nation. We have the fastest growing economy, lowest unemployment. 80% of North Dakotans feel we're headed in the right direction. We're even ranked as the best run and performing state in the nation. And we've also been characterized and had the honor bestowed upon us as being one of the happiest nations in the state, edging out Hawaii. Figure that. But it's no accident. It's good leadership. We step up to meet the challenges. We develop real solutions for real problems with real results. We used our best resources to do it. And that's the people in this room. That's the ag community. Those are the people I tap, and I have from the very beginning. I go back to 2 weeks after I was in office. We were dealing with floods in this state. First thing I did, I went to all the organizations in the state of North Dakota, and we got together to talk about what type of program can we put together, because we asked for $750,000 from USDA for a feed assistance program, and we got it. The best resource in this state is the people that intimately know and understand agriculture. They know how to solve the issues. If you get them all together, they feed off from each other, there's a synergy there, and you do it. I mean, these are people born of the land, born of faith and hope. They're humble, and yet they're proud of their accomplishments. They're resilient and tenacious. They'll sit on a tractor all day, and then they'll sit up all night caring for a newborn calf that looks like it's on its last leg. You know, no disrespect to the Marines. They have a great motto, but I think it first started with those in agriculture. You improvise, you adapt, and you overcome. I'm proud to serve the people of this state. I'm proud to serve agriculture. I'm asking for your vote on November 4th. God bless and safe travels.
Thank you, Al. Thank you, Commissioner Goring. Thanks to all the ag organizations that brought us here tonight, and the rural electric cooperatives as well, who keep the lights on for us. I appreciate the chance to be with all of you here and everyone across North Dakota on the radio broadcast. I have to return again to thank Nikki, and it's getting closer to bedtime. And I think they're listening. She was coaching junior high volleyball, and as she finished that up, I know it's time to get the kids ready for bed, and she's making supper as well. So if the kids are listening out there, go to bed when your mom tells you to. And I'll be there after you're asleep and give you a kiss on the forehead. Good night. This is a historic time of great opportunity for North Dakota. This is something that has been given to us as a blessing. They can't take credit for 300 million years worth of geology going on underneath our feet. But the people you represent, I think, can take credit for the hard work that they do, bringing in a crop on top of the ground, grazing cattle on the grass that grows on top of that ground. And I would promise, as your ag commissioner, I would never forget what you do, the work shoes that you wear, the families that you raise. We've had agriculture for 125 years of statehood, and we'll have it for another 125 years if we take care of it. I know that we have a great partner in energy that will obviously make some farms and ranches a little better, depending on whether or not you severed the mineral rights. As a rancher once told me, there's no better cross on a cow than a couple of oil wells. But if you don't have those wells, have an ag commissioner that helps you take care of the surface and make sure that you'll be there after the oil is gone. Opportunities don't come without challenges, and it's one thing to take credit, but it's quite another thing to also take responsibility for making sure we have a rail system that gets our products to market, make sure that our landowners are taken care of, and that we have students who look at North Dakota as a place to make their life. I know that as Ag Commissioner, I would be dedicated to those things and telling your story. I believe we need leadership, and I also believe we need balance. General Patton is the one who said, if everyone's thinking the same, someone's not thinking. And I believe we need new ideas. And I've brought new ideas to this campaign that I have campaigned on, and I've worked hard to explain to North Dakotans and tell that story. I do that on your behalf. I would appreciate the honor of your vote this fall to be your Ag Commissioner. I ask for that, and I pray that everyone has a good October here. this will all be done in not so long a time. May we all have safe travels, and may I get home to put that kiss on their forehead tonight. Thank you.
This concludes the 2014 North Dakota Agriculture Commissioner debate. Again, thank you to the candidates, Ryan Taylor and Doug Goring, for participating. Thank you to the North Dakota Farmers Union, the North Dakota Stockmen's Association, the North Dakota Association of Rural Electric Cooperatives, the North Dakota Corn Growers Association, the North Dakota Soybean Growers, the Red River Valley Sugar Beet Growers, and the Northwest Landowners Association for hosting this event. I'm Al Gustin. Remember that November 4th is Election Day. Please head to the polls. Safe travels. Thank you.